Hey guys, so what you guys are seeing here in this video is my second leg day of my hypertrophy mesocycle. Currently where I'm at in terms of my periodization model, um, since my powerlifting meet is I am in my third hypertrophy mesocycle. Since I did compete, this will be my final one until I begin a strength focused mesocycle where I try to get as strong as possible on the squat, bench, and deadlift, and allocate a lot more of my work to actual strength. So I'm really excited for that. But I'm gonna have one more good mesocycle cycle to add as much lean tissue as I can, and then take advantage of what lean tissue I have gained to get stronger and set some really cool new PRs. So I'm excited for that and show you guys how this process works. But what you guys are seeing here is a little bit lower reps on deadlift, and this is just for the sake of variation. Plus, I wanted to transition more back into a little bit of strength work on deadlift since I've been doing super high reps for two mesocycles in a row on deadlift, and I find that I just respond so much better to deadlift when I do lower reps, and this is more like a transitionary period. With getting myself more used to these higher percentages going into my strength block, but I'm not really progressing beyond maintenance volume for technique with deadlift, since it's just not the best exercise for overall hypertrophy because there is just super fatiguing and takes away from volume that you could do on other movements that would get your legs bigger or your back bigger. But anyways, that's another rabbit hole I could go down. But the main point of this video I wanted to talk about is, I guess, a better way to approach training splits. Why I don't necessarily like the term, and how to optimize it basically for yourself and what your tissues can best adapt to. So the first thing I want to present to you guys, and that's fundamental to understand, is that with each muscle group, so each muscle group is going to have different abilities to produce force. And with larger force outputs, there will be larger fatigue costs. Likewise, with smaller muscle groups that have smaller force outputs, there will be lower fatigue costs. And anybody knows this if you do a RPE7 squat for 10 reps versus a RPE7 bicep curl set for 10 reps. The bicep curl is much less fatiguing. You don't feel as beat up after it, etc. And this is important because this basically means that these muscle groups have more damage that is taken on them. And as such, because there's more damage, they need longer time to recover and adapt so you can become back better. However, these smaller muscle groups, because they do not take as much damage, they do not have the capacity to produce as much force. They do not take as much damage as the larger muscle groups, and therefore probably would benefit from being trained more often beyond the scope of a quote-unquote training split. So using push-pull legs as an example, which is actually a pretty good model for training the larger muscle groups such as the chest, the legs as a whole, and then the back, which are all large muscle groups that have large abilities to produce force. Training 2 times a week is probably a good idea for those to ensure that you can get an adequate hypertrophy stimulus so that you can get bigger and come back better. Next time, make sure that you are recovered. However, with these smaller muscle groups, it makes sense to probably look outside of the scope of a training split. What I mean by this is that these smaller muscle groups, such as the delts, the abs, the calves, the biceps, since they do not induce as much damage, it makes more sense to spread out the volume that you can recover from and you're supposed to do beyond just a push-pull leg split. This is due to the fact that they can recover faster. They have higher volume thresholds that they can benefit from and you can still recover from and see optimal gains. And then three, and I think this is really important to understand and take into consideration, is that you can get higher quality volume with these smaller muscle groups if you spread it out. Because if you think about the biceps, for example, typically on a pull day, they are trained right after a lot of your back work, which does tax your biceps to a fairly large extent. And as such, the intensity and volume that you can actually get with those smaller muscle groups can be impaired slightly. Um, in addition, it can be difficult to get your smaller muscle groups to the volume in terms of sets per week that they need to grow their best if you are just limiting it to that point because you're so tired, or it just becomes junky because you're not able to induce as much of an overload stimulus as you probably need to or should. So, my practical takeaway for this is that your training split should be more so designed around what your tissues need to progress optimally in terms of muscle groups and assign volume and distribute it according throughout the week according to what is needed and what is necessary for you to best progress on these muscle groups. Um, for myself, for example, I train my chest, my back, my legs 2 times a week, but my abs, my lateral and rear delts, and then my biceps, I actually train them 4 to 5 times a week because that's what I can recover from. And ever since I've done that, and I've done this with a lot of my clients and a lot of my custom programs, people just see better gains. They see better quality of work. They are not as gassed when they get around to it, and they can see better results. So my takeaway for you guys is to don't be afraid to look outside of just a training split, and be willing to experiment and see what works best for you. If you guys do want more information on this in terms of training frequency for each muscle group, I recommend Renaissance Periodization. They have a ton of great articles on frequency, or you guys can get a custom program to get this type of stuff applied to yourself so you can best optimally progress. But yeah, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope this was helpful.